Wow, I never thought I would see the day where Xiaomi got beat by China Mobile in terms of price to performance. This is the China Mobile A3s. Alright, let's start with the build quality of this phone. This phone's made of plastic. It's a kind of smoothish plastic that's different from Lumia plastic and the really hard matte plastic. It's a little bit glossy, but you cannot really tell that there's fingerprints on here because it doesn't really pick them up and lets them, makes them visible compared to other kinds of plastic, so it's okay. The benefit of having a plastic phone like this with this kind of material is that it's light, so it doesn't weigh a lot, and it's pretty durable as well, which means that as long as you don't drop it, face down like this thing will last for a pretty long time in terms of durability. Even if you drop it, it should be okay. Just like the Redmi 4A, almost the same kind of material there, except this one feels a little bit more durable. In terms of features on the back, you can see here that there is the LED flash, your camera, as well as your indented fingerprint sensor. And if I flip it up over here, you'll see that the camera module does stick out a tiny bit, but it's really not that big of an issue. And you look at the bottom, there is the China Mobile logo, as well as your speaker grill here. And on the side, we have your volume button, as well as the power button, which is textured differently also. And finally, we have the SIM card slot on the left side. And up top here, we have the headphone jack, as well as the micro USB port. And as you can see, the bezels on this phone are not very pretty. Look at the top and bottom bezels. This looks like pretty much like the Redmi Note 4 or the Redmi 4A, which has the closest specs to this phone. The top and bottom bezels are pretty big. You do have capacitive buttons at the bottom where you have home. Oh, my bad. You have home, you have back, as well as a multitasking button on the left. And on the side bezels, they're actually not as big as I thought, but they're still big enough to be ugly. So this phone doesn't look nice, but you cannot really expect this phone to be a beauty, especially at $65. And considering the specs inside are actually pretty amazing. So it's an ugly phone, I do admit, but that's kind of what you get for the price. So no complaining. Alright guys, let's talk about the display. This is an IPS LCD with a 720p resolution, but then again, this is a 5.2-inch display, so it actually looks pretty good. And to be honest, I really think that IPS panel technology has advanced to the point where you can produce some very good LCDs like what you see here for a pretty cheap price, so you don't really see bad looking LCDs on cheap phones anymore. So that's actually a good thing. As you can see, this display looks pretty good. Pictures look pretty good also. Very good color saturation. Very crisp and nice, even though it is 720p, just because this is a small 5.2-inch display. The one thing that I will say this is a downside would be the maximum brightness. This phone, it's already at maximum brightness, so you cannot really tell. But if you try using this outside, you cannot really see it properly, which kind of sucks sometimes. And the other thing as well is that touch sensitivity is not the best. It's good enough for most people, if not everybody. But if I touch it super lightly, especially with a callous finger from playing guitar, then sometimes it won't work. But as you can see, even then it worked pretty well, and I was touching it pretty softly also. So as you can see, it still works. So the touch sensitivity is just not as good as like an iPhone, but it's definitely more than good enough for most people. So here you have your speaker grill, and I will say that these speakers here are pretty average. They're not too good, they're not too bad. In terms of audio volume, they're actually pretty decent. The audio volume is good enough for most people, especially if you want to use it. The audio quality is also decent. You're obviously not going to be outputting some insane quality, but I think it's good enough for most people. The only thing is that the bass is obviously lacking, so you will hear, hollowness in terms of bassy songs or even bassy explosions in action-packed movies also. So let's listen to this clip from Robot Chicken.
I followed you to this hot chocolate factory, Two-Face, and this time I'm bringing you down.
Not so fast, Batman. Your fate lies in a flip of this coin. Heads, you live. Tails, you die. Oh, death.
I'm sorry, Harvey.
Don't call me Harvey. Call me by my new name, Three-Face. This is my three-sided die. 1, you live. 2, you die. 3, we drink hot chocolate together. Looks like you're gonna three-sided die.
Watch out for that, please. Three-Face, I'm really sorry about the hospital.
Call me by my real name, Four-Face. I'm holding 4 straws in my hand. If you choose the shortest one, you die. If you choose the longest one, you live. The other 2 will determine whether or not I throw bleach on your costume or we drink hot chocolate together.
All right, Four-Face, I'll play your game.
chocolate.
The soup's not bad either.
Oh, yeah? Can I try some?
Oh, wait, Harvey, no!
All right, let's talk battery here. There's is a 2800 milliamp hour battery with a Snapdragon 425, which, to be honest, I was expecting better battery life from this. It's not bad already, I will say that, but it's not as good as other Snapdragon 425 phones that I've tested. And let me show you what the battery life is like. It gets around, 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, 6 hours most of the time. However, I have seen other, phones get, 7 hours of screen on time and even 8. This one only gets about 6 hours of screen on time. You do have a micro USB to charge it at the bottom, but it's good enough. But I really hoped that China Mobile releases an OTA update to increase the battery life here. All right, let's talk about the software. Here we have Android 7.1 Nougat, and there is a light skin on top of Android. For example, the launcher here has been replaced, so there is no app drawer. It's just kind of like your iPhone style. And then you also have your notification shade that has been switched also. And finally, going to the settings. The settings is also lightly skinned, but really nothing too great here. I do know some people would rather have fully stock Android, but this kind of light skin I'm mostly okay with. In terms of performance, when I first started using it, it was a little bit laggy, but it finally got better as I started using it. So I think it was just a case of the phone had to kind of get used to itself. This phone is okay when you're doing, regular stuff, swiping up and down, accessing notifications, swiping between home screens. Where you start seeing slowdowns a little bit is once you start launching apps. So if I launch Google Play Newsstand, you will see that there is a fairly decent pause before opening it. And if I open something that is less intensive, like Chrome, there is less of a pause there. And if I open Google Play Music, you will see that there is going to be a pause, but it's not going to be too great. The other thing to note is that there isn't a lot of RAM in this phone. So once you open too many things and you start trying to open more stuff, you will see that the apps won't actually just instantly launch. They will have to reload because it will have to clear out the RAM in order to make more space for the new stuff that you open. So you won't be able to play the most intense game on this device, but you will be able to play, basic stuff. For example, Candy Crush, kind of like here. It will work pretty good. However, do note that launching a game like this would actually take fairly long also, just because of how little RAM there is. So there really is not really much for this. This will not be your typical gaming phone. You won't be able to game on this device, but I will say that the actual performance of this phone when you're playing, not so intense games is going to be fine. So you should be able to, for example, if your mom wants this and she wants to just play Candy Crush, as you can see here, it plays perfectly fine, and other games will play pretty good as well, as long as they are not too graphically intense. The fingerprint sensor here isn't that fast, but I gotta say that it actually works pretty decently. So as I touch it, you will see 1, 2, 3, bang. It does take 1 second or so to unlock the phone, but I think it's serviceable. So if you do want to use it, it will work, and it does work fast enough that it's not super annoying to touch it every single time. So this phone doesn't have the best network connectivity. You will be able to get 3G in Canada and the USA, but you will not be able to get LTE in Canada or the USA because you only have bands 3 and 7. And to be honest, it's actually going to be pretty difficult to get 4G LTE even in Europe because you do not have band 20 on this phone. So that's one thing. It's a very cheap phone, granted, so you don't have that much support for that many network bands. So I will say that it will work in 3G most places, but not 4G in most places. Wi-Fi performance here is very good. There's absolutely nothing to complain about. GPS performance here is actually surprisingly decent. Locking on times are actually not too bad, and it doesn't really jump around that much either. All right, so I gotta say that in terms of the camera, I am actually the most surprised, pleasantly surprised by the camera. The camera quality here is actually super good, especially for a $65 phone. To be honest, I was expecting this to get worse camera performance than the Xiaomi Redmi 4A, which is about $100 to $95. But this one actually surpasses the Redmi 4A in some areas. For example, if you look at a few pictures, you will see that there is copious amounts of detail in these photos. Color reproduction is actually very, very decent also. And looking at how good the detail is when you zoom in, I'm actually surprised. And I gotta say that some of these pictures, the good ones at least, actually are close to or match higher end phones like the Redmi 5, which is quite an accomplishment. But then again, this is not all sunshine and games when you look at all the photos. For example, the biggest problem I see with the camera here would be the inability to focus quickly. So if you have a moving object like my dog, you're gonna get a lot of blurry photos. And the other thing as well is that this thing does not focus very well either if you're moving in any fashion. So really, it's a pretty slow shutter speed, and that can be an issue as well. The other thing as well is that HDR mode actually works pretty well. The front-facing camera is average at best. Sometimes the pictures just turn out bad. Sometimes they turn out okay. Sometimes, and a lot of the times they actually turn out blurry. So that's one area where I'm not too happy about with the camera quality. Talking about the last thing, the video quality, that is not very good. I gotta say that I'm surprised by how bad the video quality is compared to the photo quality, because the photo quality is actually very good. The video quality, not so much. So it's a lot closer to 720p in terms of detail than it is to 1080, which is a sad thing here. All right, so what are my final thoughts about the China Mobile A3s? I gotta say that a lot of this phone is adequate enough. And the surprising thing here is that the camera quality was so good. This thing has a very, very good camera for $65. If you take, good pictures, people won't be able to tell that it's from a $65 phone. I think the biggest weakness in this phone would be the lack of network connectivity. You don't get 4G in North America anywhere, and you don't even have band 20 for Europe as well. But I have to say that for the price, you get a lot of phone for $65, and I have to say that I do recommend this phone. A lot of people are talking about the Huawei Elite, which I have not tried, and I might have to get my hands on. But for now, the China Mobile A3s for $65 is an amazing deal. I will say that it's not as polished as, for example, the Redmi 4A, which you can still get for about $95, but that's like a $30 increase, which I gotta say that is steep for the amount of phone that you get in the Redmi 4A. It's better than this, but it's not that much better. So let me know what your thoughts are on the China Mobile A3s for $65. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell icon beside the subscribe button as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.